What's going on, Lion fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, once again joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we're here to discuss something that I thought was really interesting that I kind of came across late in the day yesterday. We've been talking a lot about PFF and a lot of their rankings and a lot of the content they've been putting out, and for a good reason, right? Like they are actually stirring up some good conversation. Even if we don't always agree with it, it is good conversation to have about football as a whole, or again, your individual team. And yesterday I kind of came across this video that this live stream that they had over on their YouTube channel where they were basically talking about the best and worst rosters in the NFL. And one of the videos that specifically caught my eye was one that they had basically, it's about a 3 to 4 minute video where they were highlighting the Detroit Lions and saying that they feel like the Lions not only have one of the best rosters in the NFL, but an argument could be made that they have the best roster in the NFL. So they had this live stream where they broke it down. They also have an entire article over on their website where they basically rank out each of these rosters from top to bottom. So first and foremost, when you look at the Lions roster, do you think they belong amongst the best in the NFL at this point?
I mean, yeah, man. At this juncture, I think you have to include them in the conversation. Even, I'm going to provide, but we're going to provide both sides of the argument here, right? There's a lot to talk about with this, so I'm excited to break it down. But to agree with them, you have to. They've constructed this roster to be, both really good in 2024 and in the future. The foundation is there. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell talk about it all the time. They've talked about it since 2021, back when they took over. So I do think they certainly belong in the conversation, along with I don't know why I said that weird conversation. Along with 6 or 7 teams, in my opinion, that would have a worthy argument for the top spot. My quick counter that we're going to get into is I think it's a little premature to put the Lions at 1 if you're doing a ranking like this, just because I do think the Lions roster, despite being really talented, still requires a bit of projection. Because we don't know. There's some, as good as they are top to bottom, there are some unproven commodities, right, Miko?
Yeah.
We're going to have to see what the secondary looks a lot better on paper, but paper don't matter when it, comes to December, January, and, the real football starts to get played, according to Bill Belichick. So, yeah, I think there's definitely an argument to be made, but then I think it's a little premature to put them at the top spot. What about you?
Yeah, that's where I kind of went a different direction, because I as a fan, I appreciate that type of praise, that type of recognition that hey, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have done a great job of building this roster, and they do a good job of illustrating all of the different ways in which they've gone about addressing this roster, drafting a Penei Sewell, getting an Amon-Ra St. Brown, surrounding a Jared Goff with all of these talented skill positions, as well as an offensive coordinator that helps him operate in a way that is best for him in the way that he plays football. But like you said, I still look at, and maybe it's me being cynical, but I still do look at this roster and I look at the areas that you kind of mentioned that kind of have some question marks that are still not yet proven for sure. Speaking of one of those being wide receiver 2, right? As much as you and I both love JMO and think that JMO could have a big year, it's a projection. It's nothing that we can tangibly say well, based off of these other 2 years that he's had in the league, that he's had this type of production. No, we're just expecting that JMO is going to come into year 3 and really hit the ground running. The same could be said for the corners, right? We talked about that in our last video, about both of us having a number of questions about the secondary as a whole between corners and safeties. So I think there's enough there to do, like you said, put them amongst, the probably 7, 8, maybe easily top 10 rosters in the NFL. But I do think, you're getting a little ahead of yourself if you feel like the Lions have, one of the top 2 or 3 rosters in the league right now.
Yeah, I would put them top 5, no doubt, just from my personal perspective. I think they're top 5 without a shadow of a doubt, but I still have so if I were making this ranking, to be clear here, I did this exercise a little bit during my lunch today while I was just sitting out and hanging out. But I would have the Niners at 1 still.
Mhm.
Top to bottom, when they're healthy, man, they've got people at every level of the offense and defense, and they're proven commodities. Like, they've been there, done that. And, remember, for this exercise, we're just talking about best overall rosters right now, because if you're putting it for like the right now and the future, there's definitely an argument for the Lions to be one, because they are still so young and a lot of their core pieces have room for growth. But
Yeah.
in this exercise, we're just looking at it just for 2024. We're not factoring in coaches, things of that nature. So I would have the Niners one. The Ravens would be two for me. You still have Lamar, former MVP. Their offensive line is going to be good again. They figure it out on the outside with the players they have. They have Zay Flowers. The defense is still nails and nasty, and it's a John Harbaugh coach, defense in Baltimore. So, I think they'll rebound well despite losing Mike McDonald. I would have the Lions at 3, just because I do feel like they've got all the guys, and like I said, a little bit of projection. But what do you think about that? 3.
I think 3 is high. I still think 3 is kind of high.
Sure.
I think I like your first 2, right? I do like San Francisco. Probably for me is the best roster from top to bottom. I think a good argument could be made that Baltimore has one of the top rosters, so I have no problem with you having them at 2. I think 3 and 4 for me is where I start to look at both Philadelphia, right? I really like how the Eagles roster is kind of constructed from top to bottom. They've done, just like the Lions, they've done a really good job drafting the last couple of years, retooling, being able to let go. Like, it's a sign that you have a solid roster and as well as a solid coaching staff when you're able to, either trade away or let talented players walk away in free agency and just be able to retool again, either through free agency or through the draft. And the Eagles have done that really well. So I would have them probably at 3. At 4, I personally would have to have the Chiefs. And I know this is where you and I kind of disagree, because even with PFF's list, they have the Chiefs at 2. And I think the thing with the Chiefs is this. I think when you start to look at the names on their roster, especially the guys that are starting for them and playing heavy amounts of snaps, an argument could absolutely be made that there are more players on the Lions roster that I would take if I was building a team than I would from the Chiefs, right? If we're just going off of names alone and what, those individual players do. But something has to be said, Morgan, in my opinion, for a Chiefs team that has won back-to-back Super Bowls, right? It may not be the sexiest roster. It may not be an entire roster full of top 10 players at their position, but something about those guys, they complement each other so well on the field. And I think it does go beyond just coaching. And I do think it goes beyond just Patrick Mahomes' magic, that this roster is able to still complement each other in such a way for them to continuously be a favorite in the NFL every year to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, no doubt. I agree with all those points. And the Chiefs are a fantastic organization. Their the general manager to, all the way down, like they've got it pretty well figured out. In my opinion, this is where, like, the Lions roster is definitely better than the Chiefs, but this is kind of my take on it, is the delta between the second best quarterback in the NFL and Patrick Mahomes is the widest of any gap in football, in my opinion. Like, if you're looking at the first tackle compared to the second best tackle and so on and so forth. But I just think Patrick Mahomes is that good. I think he's the Michael Jordan of this sport.
Yeah.
I really do. I think he's phenomenal. Say what you want about his, all the other things, but the dude
Goofy
is a
commercials
baller.
and all that.
Yeah. The voice, the ketchup on the steak. He's the biggest force multiplier in the NFL. But yeah, they're still a really good roster. I'm not, throwing stones. They are, and like you said, they've won a couple Super Bowls as of late to have some proof in the pudding. But yeah, I'd have them a little bit further behind. To be clear here, yeah, I'd go Lions 3, and then if I were going down, I would definitely have the Chiefs. The Texans would not be far behind. The Bengals, teams like that. That's how they go. The Cowboys, they go Bengals 8, Cowboys 9. So yeah, it's a good exercise. Go ahead.
No, and I think that's a good, like, distinction there, because I do think, like, that's where I think once you get to, like, for me, once I get to like 5 is where things start to look much more like a lot of these teams are fairly similar, and that's probably where I would have the Lions is at 5. Um, but again, not too far behind them would be the Texans and would be the Cowboys and would be the Bengals. And the thing that, again, if we're just looking at rosters, which is all this conversation is about, like you can just look at talent and it's all about like, okay, well, if guys are healthy and if guys are playing at their highest ability, well, yeah, this is how this roster could be one of the best. We know though that once week 1 gets here and once, actual football is being played, a lot of other factors come into play, right? Depth come into play. Coaching is now, we have to start talking about that. Um, Again, just players' mental makeup, because as talented as a roster like the Cowboys may be, or as talented as a roster as the New York Jets may look on paper, we've also known that those two franchises have had struggles, right? Once the actual season has kicked off and once they actually have to play the games and be efficient on either the offense or defensive side, or just be consistent from start to finish, that's where teams start to fall apart. So again, once we start factoring those parts in, well, then yeah, a team like the Lions start to climb up a little bit more. A teams like the Chiefs climbs up considerably higher, right? Because we've seen that they've been able to do it no matter the question marks that they've had around their roster. So that's to your point. I think that's what makes this a really fun exercise, is that it does require you to strip away any type of bias that you may have about like how teams navigate the season, and just look at their rosters and look at the players that are available to them and say like, okay, do you think this roster is more talented than the other? And I think the beauty of what the Lions have been able to do the last couple of years is that they've been able to firmly put themselves in that conversation to say, no, we do have one of the better rosters from top to bottom. And you do have to get very nitpicky to say that they don't.
Yeah, and I love the point you made about like the Jets, because the Jets are one, super talented roster. Looks like it was made by a teenager on Madden.
Yeah.
A lot of very namey, if you will. But then we've seen Robert Saleh be a little shaky, and he's dealt with a lot, to be fair, man. They've and it's the New York media, but yeah, that's why, like you said, it is a really fun exercise, because you're thinking about it. You're stripping away a ton. I like that terminology too, because you're taking away Andy Reid, you're taking away Dan Campbell, and it goes all the way up to ownership too. That's what, for me at least, I start thinking about that. Like, yeah, the Cowboys have been talented forever, but it hasn't amounted to much because their owner's a pain, right? And is meddling and in the middle of everything. And, so I love, if we were doing organization, that might be fun too. That might be a good off-season topic to do it, factor in all those. But yeah, this is a good one. And another team that's sneaky going to be up there too, in my opinion, is the Browns. Like, if the Browns can, like, if their quarterback, if Watson can tap into not being bad, like, that's a really good roster.
I love that. He can just like not be bad.
He was
like,
bad. I mean, yeah,
no, that's true though, right? Like, he's been bad since they've paid him, but we know the talent that he does have available to him when he's been like locked in and when he's playing at a high level. I go with another team in the AFC. I go with the Dolphins, right? Like, they're another team that it just feels like, from a talent perspective, and then obviously you start to factor in their style of play, they feel like a team that should be, absolutely contending for conference championships and things of that nature. And we just kind of got to see if they can ever really put it all together.
Yeah, and the Dolphins are one for me. Like, they're very talented, obviously, like in a lot of different places, but I just have serious question marks about Tua when the going gets tough. Unfortunately for them, and they're going to be in a weird spot here soon where they have to maybe pay him, and I'm not sure that's a spot you want to be in if you're Mike McDaniel and trying to get this thing. Yeah, that's tough, right?
Probably not, but like, again, they're in the situation where like he's due, and so like you have to, almost in a way.
Yeah, people are gonna be surprised. They're gonna be like, Tua makes more than Jared Goff, and this, that, and the other, and it's just the way the market goes, like we've talked about, guys.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I think this is like a really interesting conversation. So I'm really interested to hear from you guys in the audience. Again, when you guys start to break down the best rosters in the NFL, and you start to look at the Lions, first and foremost, where do you have them ranked? Amongst the best, and not to mention, like, if you had to put together your own top 5 rosters in the NFL, what would that look like? And do you have a surprise team that you actually think is actually very good that a lot of people don't. Like, Morgan said, the Browns he thinks are really good. I think the Dolphins are really good, and probably like a lot of people don't consider it. Another team, before we kind of get out of here, the Steelers. Like, the Steelers have always found a way to be like good enough. Obviously, they haven't been as good as they've been in the past, but that's another one for people to kind of chew on there. But let us know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of who or which rosters are some of the best in the NFL going into the 2024 season? And like always, if you are looking for more content about the Detroit Lions, or if you're just trying to stay up to date on all the news and information that's coming out, you can always head over to prideofdetroit.com, where new articles are being uploaded every single day. And if you want to stay tapped into all the new videos that we're uploading over on the YouTube channel, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and that way that will keep you tapped into every piece of video content that we upload throughout the week. But with all that said, I'm Meko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.